Welcome to Real Talk with Sarah. I'm your host, Sarah Roberts, and in this show, we're going deep on ways we can silence our inner critic. You know, that voice inside your head that tells you you're not good enough, or smart enough, or skilled enough, or good looking enough to get the things you want in life, or to be who you want to be in your life. Shame hijacks our brains and stifles our creativity, and it makes us believe that we are stuck in a never-ending pattern of behaviors that we don't really want to keep repeating, but we don't know how to stop. Tonight's guest is going to show us how. Kylie Delfino of Grace, Love, Peace is with me to share her personal story of how a brush with death stole her identity and then changed her entire understanding and perception of healing. Her story alone will blow you away, but you'll also leave with a blueprint to help you improve your life and break free from your inner critic for once and for all. So grab your pen and your notebook. Episode 4 of Real Talk with Sarah starts right now. Well, I hope you're sitting down because my guest tonight is going to take us on a journey out of shame and into love. And I don't think there is a more worthy goal than cultivating a greater sense of self-love. Welcome, Kylie.
Thank you, Sarah.
I am so excited to have this conversation with you. We've been talking about it for a long time. Let's talk about it. What happened in 2015 to completely change your life?
Okay, let's squeeze an elephant into a shoebox and make this quick. So, in early 2015, I was 10 years into my nutrition career, and I was so deeply passionate about it. I worked in the cancer care arena. I had my own nutrition clinic, the clinical nutritionist at the Ottawa Integrative Centre, doing food education at the Regional Cancer Centre, teaching yoga, teaching stand-up paddling, just anything that was to do with the physical body and nutrition. I was so deeply passionate about. And I traveled all over the world doing workshops and education. And I had been doing this for about 10 years. And in early May 2015, we had a family emergency in Australia. So I flew over, spent 5 weeks, 5 very stressful and emotional weeks with my family in Australia. And 2 days after I arrived back, I was back in my nutrition clinic, and it was a Friday morning. I was sitting with a client, and she leaned forward and went, "Kylie, I think you're having a stroke." And I went, "What? I know I'm not having a stroke. I wasn't exhibiting any of the signs." But I got up, I went to the washroom, and the entire right side of my face had fallen. And self-diagnosis straight away, I thought Bell's palsy. That makes total sense. I've been on international flights. That's a viral thing. We'll just leave it be.
Oh my gosh, you didn't take yourself immediately to the hospital?
No.
Okay.
Self-diagnosis.
Okay.
So I did eventually see my family doctor the next day, and she said, it should be fine. It's just viral, Bell's palsy. It'll pass. Well, about 4 days later, my speech began to slur. It was hard to swallow food. I started losing the vision in my right eye, and I was unable to lift my arms above my shoulders. And the doctors were stumped. And they just keep giving me loads and loads of high doses of prednisone, so I would stabilize for a little bit and then non-responsive. So at this point, I'm like, oh my God, I have a business, I have these responsibilities, and I don't want people to know that I'm sick. I work in health. So my assistant started to let clients know that Kylie had a virus, and that as soon as I was well again, we would rebook their schedules.
So you were hiding it from your clients because of shame?
I was so ashamed.
Yeah.
Sarah, here I was traveling the world telling people how to be healthy, living a healthy lifestyle. And here's something was happening with my body. I had no idea what was going on. So as the months progressed, I was not responding to any of the treatment.
So the months progressed.
Yes.
So are you in the hospital for months?
No, I was at home because on some days I could dress and feed myself. On other days I completely could not get out of bed or even shower myself. And it's a very frightening experience when something's happening to your body that you have no control over. And I thought I was a pretty good candidate to advocate for myself in our Canadian health system, having worked, over 10 years in cancer care. Yeah. But I'll tell you right now, when you start losing your speech, your vision, your mobility, fear overtakes in a way that I've never experienced in my life. And I completely gave up my personal power and said, give me any treatment that you think is going to work. Mm-hmm. So specialist after specialist after specialist, come the August, we finally came with the diagnosis of an incurable neuromuscular disease called myasthenia gravis. I know it's a mouthful.
I've never heard of this.
And I was non-responsive to any of the treatment. So here I was faced with, I have to fess up with this. Mm-hmm. I have to actually come clean, and I actually have to acknowledge this to myself.
So did you even feel like even you were in denial?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How could this be? I believed I was infallible to it, but as the months were progressing, the shame around the illness, the guilt I felt for falling sick and letting so many people down, clients, these contracts, responsibilities. Mm-hmm. And I realized about 4 months into it, my attachment to my identity of who I was, an international speaker, a trainer, a person that holds these cancer retreats all through the Caribbean. And without my consent or my control, my identity was very slowly getting dismantled. What we could sell within my business had to be sold. The clinic had to be sublet. What could be packaged and sold was. What didn't just happened to be closed up. My retail food line closed. It was a complete dismantling of who I thought I was. And on top of that, here I was unable to dress and feed myself on some days. Oh my gosh. So my entire self-worth was evaporating.
So during this time, were you preparing for death?
At this time, I still thought, there's going to be a treatment, there's going to be a treatment. And then we did chemotherapy, we did IVIG, we did plasmapheresis. And plasmapheresis was something that stabilized me for a little bit. But I had made the decision, I didn't want to live like this. I didn't want to be this burden on my family. And I felt so incredibly worthless within myself. I had nothing to contribute.
Or you felt like you had nothing.
You're right. Yes. At the time, I felt my inner critic was telling me I had nothing to contribute. Wow. And my husband, when I said, I want to look into assisted suicide, I don't want to live like this. And he kept saying to me, Kai, if we have 10% of you, that is better than nothing at all.
Oh my gosh.
So as time progressed along, we decided we would take a trip to Florida. And every day I had been praying, God, return my life to what it was, or end it, just end it. So I had stabilized enough that we got down to Florida. We had been going there for the 15 years we were married, and it was just a nice family holiday. But we got there, and this is where we stand-up paddled. This is where we ran every morning on the beach before breakfast. So it was a living torture to be in the playground that we used to be upon. And I could barely get up the stairs, let alone leave the bedroom. And my condition started to dip.
In Florida?
In Florida. So my husband said immediately, you're on a flight. We contacted my neurologist. I headed straight back to Ottawa. He got in the car and started driving. By the time we landed in Ottawa, I felt terrible. And 4 hours later, I was rushed to the Civic. I was going into respiratory crisis. It was getting harder and harder to breathe. And things happen pretty quick in emergency room. The minute you have a respiratory incident, you're in there pretty quick. Mm-hmm. So literally I was straight into respiratory ICU. And for anybody that's never been in that situation, it is chaotic. There's 100 people around you, everybody's working on you. It is very, very frightening and very, very real. Mm. So as this was happening, I was unaware of going in and out of consciousness, but This is the best way I can describe the incident. I was fully aware of myself in the hospital bed being worked on, and I was fully aware of myself standing outside watching it happen. And as the experience progressed, I also became aware of myself leaving the room and the scene as well. And in a very short space of time, I was resuscitated and slipped back into my body. And at this point, remember, I'm on my own. My husband's still traveling back.
Yeah.
The nurses said, we need to contact somebody. So I said, contact my husband's ex-wife. And they went, what? And we're a blended family and very close. So Monique, my husband's ex-wife, and Melissa, our youngest daughter, came in. And it was just so comforting to have familiarity near me. And then the doctor sat down and said, okay, over the next 10 hours, we're going to monitor your breathing. And if it drops below a certain level, we will be inducing you into a coma and putting an intubation tube in. So at this point I went, I need to speak to my husband now. Yeah. So we were able to contact Paul on Facebook, and it took some hours to stabilise me, but the minute I was put into ICU that night, I had 10 hours to process what had happened.
Waiting for Paul to arrive.
Waiting for my husband to arrive and drive, and praying that he's arriving safe, right? Driving all that way. So meditation is something that I came across travelling in Thailand when I was 19 years of age. So I went, they want me to watch my breath. I'm watching my breath. And I sat there and literally watched on the monitors my breath in and out, which is one of the most basic meditation procedures. And as I laid there, through the full night, much of the experience became a lot clearer to me. And I realized all those prayers of give me back my life or end it, I got my wish.
Meaning?
Meaning, I came to the end of life and I was lucky enough to be resuscitated back to life.
But a new life.
A completely different life. A completely and absolutely different way of seeing life, of walking through life, of showing up with life and interacting with what we call this experience life.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What an incredible story.
Yeah.
So please help us just to finish that out. So Paul arrives.
Paul arrived, yes.
He does arrive.
My sister-in-law arrived early in the morning. My brother-in-law had made me a nice breakfast, and he had arrived, and he knew straight away. He was like, I know something's happened, but we need to go home and rest. And
so what happened? So you're laying in that bed, and you're waiting for Paul to arrive. You have this sort of near-death experience. You have this near-death experience. You have this awakening moment. And then what happens as far as being in the hospital? Are they saying all of a sudden you don't display symptoms anymore? Are you feeling better?
No, I was in ICU being monitored for those 10 hours. And come the end of the 10 hours, my breathing had stabilised enough where the intubation wasn't required.
Okay.
And I believe that I stabilised it through stilling myself, through prayer, and through that conscious awareness of, you know what, nothing else on the face of the earth mattered in those 10 hours than me being fully present with myself and fully present in each of those breaths.
Wow.
And that is when the experience of the near-death experience, the visuals and the kinesthetic experience of it began to unfold and make more sense to me. Not that I could articulate it at that time, it just gave me a sense of presence and peace that allowed me to connect with myself at a level I'd never experienced. And I had never experienced the sense of love, the pure, unconditional love that I experienced whilst being resuscitated back into life.
Love from yourself to yourself?
Love from myself to myself, love to, I guess, what we call divine, to what we call anything that we believe as that greater power from us that isn't embedded in indoctrination and guilt and shame. Because I know for a fact after that experience, that is an energy that could never condemn, could never convey guilt or shame to control a person. Certainly would not condemn a person for their sexuality or a divorce or all of these rules we tend to have in our human consciousness around what divinity is.
Yeah, you're really able to see the truth of life.
Absolutely.
And what it means to be alive.
And I sincerely believe, Sarah, that we have one purpose. We have one purpose on this earth when we come here. And it is learn to love ourselves unconditionally and love the people around us unconditionally. That's it.
That's it.
That is it. I know, I say that's it. It's a profoundly difficult thing to harness and maintain and stay in. But it is a journey that we come here to go through to meet ourselves at a different level.
Only love is real.
That's right. That's right.
Oh my gosh. And you were able to fully experience that, where the rest of us, we can say these things. We can say only love is real, or we believe in love, or we know that that's the one thing that's most important, but you can really come at it from a different perspective.
I experienced it. And then shortly thereafter, and let me be very clear, this wasn't a miraculous healing. This was, I made the decision afterwards to, if that is death, I have nothing to fear. And it had been my greatest fear leading up to this point.
Like in all of your life, or just since getting that?
Since having my physical capabilities taken away. It was like... And maybe if I'm actually to rephrase that a little bit, it wasn't that I was afraid of death, I was afraid of living and not being contributing or competent. Now that you've asked me that, that's probably a little more clearer and honest answer of it. But yes, at the point I felt completely unworthy. And having gone through this death experience, having lost all of my identity, it was a real lesson in letting go and acceptance. And then this new experience had happened, and I was very privately processing this, very privately. Nobody knew except for my husband and immediate family what had happened. Strategically, with the help of the doctors, we went down to minimise the medications, and it took a year to get well again, an able body again.
Wow.
But what had happened was I had found a phone call from a breast cancer action group in New Brunswick, and they phoned and asked would I come back and do a nutrition talk. And I had explained to her, I can't possibly do that, there's no way, I don't do that anymore, and I physically can't do that anymore. And this woman persisted and persisted for 2 months. And eventually she asked me to come and speak at this conference. But I got to speak about the near-death experience and what it taught me, not about nutrition and the physical body.
Oh my gosh, well we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, Kylie is going to help us understand how we can take control of our mindset and what we can do to stop the crazy cycle. Back in a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I've got Kylie Delfino with me sharing how we can all learn to silence our inner critic. So, do we all have an inner critic?
Oh, absolutely.
Every single one of us has
Well,
them?
here's a question for you. Are you aware of the conversation in your head?
Yes.
Yeah. And is it always loving and encouraging and beautiful and kind?
Every moment of the day.
Yeah, not.
No.
No, I mean, that inner critic's voice can become such a cacophony. It sounds like the itty-bitty crappy committee up there having an argument every day. And I lived with it for the 10 months that I couldn't move out of bed. It was telling me how bad I was, how worthless I was. And then having just come through this death experience and then being asked to come and speak at this conference, my inner critic was, absolutely not. There is no way. All of the public speaking I have done throughout my career, I have stood on stage with double-blind studies to back it up. It has been proven science. It has been articulately laid out. And you're asking me to stand up in front of 300 women I've never met and share my rawest, most vulnerable moment and admit how guilty and how shameful I felt around my illness.
But you did that.
I did that. I was forced to do that. They changed the name of the event. They changed the date. She sent me a ticket and she said, you have to come. And if I'd have listened to my inner critic, Sarah, I never would have followed through. And I agonized over it for about 3 months. And I knew what I was going to share when I went there to do the first talk. And it was the imagery that I saw during the death experience. And it was the birth of that inner critic. And this is the best way I can describe it, right? We all have it, and it is a part of our humanization process. So when baby comes in, and baby is in utero with mum, that consciousness of that little being has no idea that it is a separate entity to mother. As mother eats, as mother drinks, the baby is nourished. And even after birth, right, baby cries, she gets changed, baby cries, she gets fed. But anybody that's been around children, had their own children or nieces or nephews, you see it about that 12 months, even a little bit earlier, where they start going, wow, I've got a vessel. You know, they're playing there. They suddenly realise things are attached. They're trying to put their foot in their mouth. And they still, at that point, do not understand that they are a separate organism. So in their consciousness. So fast forward a few years to that terrible two kind of age.
Okay.
And we call it terrible twos because we think that child's being defiant. But just let's take a scenario. Mum's in the kitchen cooking dinner and Sally is in her happy place, being her truest self, dancing around and having fun. And while she's doing that, boom, spills the milk. And Mum comes around the counter, Sally, did you do that? And little Sally goes, no, Mummy, no, I didn't.
Ah, she lies.
She lies immediately.
Yeah.
And we think that that is a child being deceitful, a child being naughty. But what's happened in that moment, Sarah, is that child has been in a place of pure love and pure existence. And in an instant, they have been shown a lack of love. In an instant, their behaviour has been punished by mother, and she feels guilt for the first time. Oh my God, I'm not lovable. And if we think about guilt as being a behavioural issue of I believe I've done something bad, and shame as an identity, I am something bad, in a holy instant, that little soul has gone, oh my God, I'm not lovable, I did something bad, what do I do? And then the minute they've told the lie, they realise as well, oh, you're not in my head with me.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
There is this, that is the instantaneous birth of the inner critic. Wow. So the inner critic then sets about on its journey to adjust our behaviour to what we believe will elicit the most love response externally from us.
So how then, okay, keep going, keep explaining.
And before we go any further, every parent that is watching this is going, oh my God, I did that to my child.
Yes.
Okay, no, that's the inner critic. The inner critic wants to point fingers and point blame. Let me be very clear. That is the child's experience of the situation. No parent generally chooses to inflict harm on their children, right? Everybody does the best they can with the resources that they have. We are all at fault and nobody is to lay blame, right? So all the parents out there, you haven't damaged your children. But we all have the birth of this inner critic, and then as we go through those ages up until 6, we learn very quickly to manage other people's emotions. So I've got a question for you. Were you ever sat down as a child and said, Sarah, this is how you receive love?
No.
No. Nobody ever does that with their children. We learn how to receive love by how it is modelled to us and the feedback we get from our external environment. Meaning, like I said, as a child, we're not taught to manage our own emotions. We're taught to manage everybody else's. You learn pretty quick. Dad's happier when you're quiet when he's watching the news. Okay? Yeah. Mum's happier when I'm out of her hair and she's in the kitchen. And the child at that age begins to understand and develop a set of rules inside of what gives me love and what doesn't give me love, and they adjust their behaviour accordingly. And much of this happens subconsciously.
So it's always seeking love?
Always. And if you think about it, we as beings, all we desire is connection and love.
Oh my gosh, well, we have to take a break. I don't want to, but we have to. When we come back, we're going to learn how to shift the inner critic's behavior. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Real Talk with Sarah. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Kylie Delfino about shame, guilt, blame, and silencing our inner critic. So what are these 3 tricks that you told me about?
Okay, so the inner critic, its sole purpose is to keep your mind out of the present moment. It is either going back, activating wounds from the past, or trying to manipulate a future outcome. Okay, so remember what we were saying about Sally, how between those ages she starts to get this little data bank inside of what works and what doesn't, what elicits love and what doesn't. So, as I said, most of this is subconscious, and we all do it to a degree. Have you ever done the I will when game with yourself?
As soon as I have that thing, I'll be happy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I've lost 10 pounds, I will be more comfortable in my body. When I have the right job, I will be much more secure in my finances.
I have the right partner, I'll finally be happy. Yeah.
Again, seeking something outside of ourselves to fulfill the fulfillment of love inside. So what that's doing is the inner critic is actually reinforcing within us that you're not good enough now. You have to be 10 pounds lighter. As you are now, you are not acceptable. So,
is the inner critic the ego?
It is a part of the ego, absolutely. The inner critic, as we know now, is the wounds of our younger self. It is a part of the ego. There's many parts to the ego, but the inner critic, and particularly the wounds of our younger child, is the biggest and most dominant part, right? So it plays the I will when game. It goes into, have you ever done this, where you're rehearsing in your head what you're going to say to that person when you see them in that situation?
Oh yeah, definitely.
We all do it, right? And we confuse that with it being rational thinking, but it's not. It's a little trick of the inner critic saying, if I keep you out of the present moment, rehearsing this, thinking that, finding evidence from the past, projecting it into the future, you can't be in the present moment. And you've experienced it, I'm sure. I'm sure you've been over the years in a business meeting where someone's there and they're not present with you. They are just barreling through a script, barreling through what they want out of the situation, thinking more to themselves what they're going to say to you as opposed to being present and listening. But we are taught, and I mean, go back to the 80s and the 90s with all the self-help books, rehearse it, pretend it, fake it till you make it. God, those 2 decades just fed the inner critic and demoralized people that were trying to move through and break through their inner critic.
Yeah, it's almost like we have to unlearn all of these things that we learned along the way.
It is an unlearning of our subconscious belief system. And there's another one that the inner critic likes to play, and that is the shoulding. Okay? When we believe we should be doing something, you know? A friend of mine calls it shoulding all over herself. You know, I should do this, I should do that. Let's be very, very, very clear. The minute you say, I should do something, okay, you are acting out of somebody else's belief system. It's not your own. Because you think about it, I want feels very different to I should.
Yes.
I want to go out for dinner. I should go to the gym.
Oh, it's a totally different energy.
And generally those shoulds come from either our immediate culture, our immediate soul group around us, or from the collective. And when we should upon ourselves, we're not acting out of what our truest desires are. But the inner critic, I mean, there's about 55, and in the workshops that we do, we go through these very specific tricks that it likes to play.
Yeah. So the internal rehearsing was another one that you were...
Yeah, so that's the plasting it out. We had another one there, which was our last one.
Let's look.
Too.
Judge yourself
Oh,
where they can.
yeah. And I'm sure you've been with friends where that happens. That's another variation of the shoulding is, oh, I'm going to be bad tonight and have a dessert.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
You know, excuse for the way I look, I've just finished gardening. You know, anything that we can justify what we think someone else is judging about us. And we fall into these patterns so subconsciously. And I don't believe that it takes a near-death experience to see this from a different angle. All it takes is meditation.
That's all it takes?
I honestly believe is meditation creates stillness with ourselves. Actually, I've got a little exercise. Do we have time?
We have 1 minute.
We have 1 minute. Okay, very quickly for everybody that's at home.
Yes.
Okay, primary relationships. I want you to count them up on your fingers.
Okay.
All right. So this is not your 500 Facebook friends. Under this category, those you spend the most time with, those you spend the most time thinking about, and those that you take the most care of. Do you have a number? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 4, 5.
Yeah, probably about 5 or 6 different people.
5 or 6 people? Okay.
Yeah.
Where are you on that list?
Yeah, I've done this exercise with you before, so I know I should have been on that list, but when I first did this exercise, I was not.
And you know, Sarah, for so many people, they don't. Because the relationship with yourself, when it is gauged upon what you are getting the feedback from externally, it's never a true relationship with yourself. And that's where I really believe meditation and conscious awareness is what brings us into the present moment and deepens our relationship with ourselves.
So you were saying that you learned meditation when you were 19 years old, when you were traveling. Had you used it all throughout your life?
You know, I went traveling in Thailand, very green. I was 19, and I remember walking through one of the temples, and I heard the singing crystal bowls for the first time. And it hit me, Sarah. I sat on the floor, I wept. It was the most beautiful and angelic thing I'd ever heard. And then I waited before I went on to London and stayed there and visited every ashram I could.
All right, well, after the break, Kylie will help us understand how pain can serve as a messenger and a teacher. Back in a moment. If you're just joining us, I have Kylie Delfino with me to share how pain can teach us things about ourselves and how we can achieve mental, emotional, and physical healing in our lives. How can we do that?
I think first we need to define what healing is. And in my mind, before I was sick, healing was healing the physical body.
Right.
I learnt that healing is being at peace no matter what is happening in the external state around you. And that is no matter what's happening with the body, no what's happening emotionally, is for us to remain in that place of self-love and self-worth.
Gosh, that is so hard to do, as you know, when you're laying in a hospital bed wondering what your life is going to be.
And feeling like a burden and worthless to everybody else.
Oh my gosh, and I think so many of us, you know, we can sort of use your story as a metaphor, but so many of us can feel like a burden in our own lives or to others, or that we're just not doing what we're supposed to be doing with our life, whatever way that manifests.
And years of working at the Cancer Centre and in my current work now, it is unbelievable the amount of people that walk through this life looking like everyday normal people that are subjected to tremendously deep emotional pain. And this is where my shift happened, away from treating the physical body and looking for something external to fix the internal. Is I sincerely believe now for any health modality to take root, we need a good, solid emotional foundation within ourselves. And that is the unconditional self-love and the unwavering self-worth. Having my identity dismantled and taken away from me taught me that my worth comes from within. Meditation is what's allowed me to remain in that state. And that's why I do believe meditation is such a profound thing that we can bring into our lives. But let's just rewind, because many of us think meditation is sitting still,
Yes.
denying every bodily thought,
Yes.
itch, you know, until enlightenment comes.
Yes, all the accoutrement, we have the altar, we have the candles.
It all has to be this ritualistic, perfect thing that we do, and it's nonsense.
Yes.
Conscious awareness is what allows us to meet our emotional self. All right? Now, I was talking before about the meditation, and I just wanted to play the crystal balls for a moment to show you.
It. It's so spectacular. For anyone that's ever heard these, they're just absolutely unbelievable.
And you saw how lightly I touched that, and I'm sure the sound guy in the other room is just squealing at the moment. But you can still hear that hum, right? Okay, so with the crystal ball meditation, sound frequency, right? Sound travels at certain beats. We function at a certain beat. When we play crystal balls, the sound resonates at 8 beats per second. That is the same fundamental tempo of the Mother Earth. And it's the same tempo that our sympathetic nervous system beats in when we're in deep REM sleep. But the beautiful thing about the sound of the singing crystal bowls in meditation is it silences that itty-bitty crappy committee up there.
I love that.
So for the new meditators, it's beautiful because you know what? It shuts down that activity and that nonsense. For the practiced meditator, this phenomenon called entrainment happens, where you start to entrain to the same beat, and it's beautiful. People have experienced, you know, that almost that feeling of levitating. It keeps you right where you are. And there are so many different forms of meditation. As I mentioned when I had to do this first talk in New Brunswick, I was like, you can't just come and drop a bomb on 300 ladies and say, go and figure that out. That's why I created the Grace Love Peace website and put all of the meditations on there, guided meditations, instrumentals. There's so much on there, and I encourage all of the viewers tonight, everything on that website is free. Please use it. It's a tool for you.
It's such a tool. It's such a beautiful resource.
But there is a very big component, I believe, in shift and change. So we've identified what healing is, and that's being at peace no matter what that's happening outside of yourself. But pain can be, emotional pain can be a very confusing thing. Some of the emotional pain that we have in our life is also some of our greatest comforts.
Okay, let's understand that a little bit better.
Okay, so we need to experience a deep level of pain before we are motivated to create change.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Change doesn't happen
in our happy, comfy place.
It doesn't at all. Now, you might think, and you know, with your background, the amount of women that you've worked with in recovery, and let's use that as an example, right? There is the desire to numb out, right? And then that numbing out goes too far. And the next morning, there's not recollection, there's guilt, there's shame, there's all of these terrible things to deal with. And then that pain of that becomes so much, go and numb out again. So it's a real payoff. Illness is another one like that. And I don't mean critical terminal illnesses. I mean the illnesses on the spectrum. I had a lady say to me, Kylie, for 15 years I've had this disease that nobody can label. And after a lot of work with herself and some deep meditation, she said, I realized my sickness gave me a great deal of power. I could say yes to what I didn't want to go to. I had control because I always had the valid excuse. I don't have to do it. It gave her deep control. And I said, what if you have that control that you desire with acceptance and love and not having to carry the pain of the sickness as well?
So how do we do it? I know through meditation.
Through meditation, but you know what? This simple awareness. We have the I Am Love bands, and
Yes.
anybody that comes to our meditations do. And we encourage, what happens is when you go out in the sunlight, they turn purple.
I know. I gave one each to my niece and nephew. So
Don't the kids love it?
Yes, I love that they turn different colors.
And when that changes, that's just a little reminder, hey, go in here. Who's running the show?
Yeah.
Who's leading that itty bitty crappy committee?
Yeah.
Or is your inner witness there observing and helping you respond to everything that's happening throughout the day, or are we blindly in reactionary mode?
Yes, and so maybe instead of, if we don't have one of your bracelets, I know we can get them from your website, but if we
Yes.
don't have one, we could use something else, a ring or an app on our phone or a timer.
Yes, actually everybody, we're a world of devices.
Yeah.
You know, this is the most simplest thing that you can do throughout the day, and I'd really encourage people to do this for one day.
Okay.
8:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night. Set an alarm on your phone, and in the little message put what is running the thoughts inside of your head at this moment.
What is running the thoughts inside your head at this moment? So,
Or-
every hour we're doing this?
Every hour. So a light little chime,
Yep.
and allow that to pop up, and you will be astonished how untethered and unregulated and how sassy and nasty that inner critic is.
So I have to say, so you and I have been friends for a while now, and I've
Yes.
done this exercise not from 8:30 till 10:30. I didn't have to go that long. I honestly could not believe in the first few hours that my phone rang, it was like, I am not speaking very kindly to myself.
And we realize it
Really?
once we can turn and observe it. And that's our inner witness, right? But we need to observe without judgment. There was a big movement, early 90s, with meditation that deny the ego, cut it off, detach from it. You can't do that because it's a part of us. And being a part of us, trying to deny it, is an act of self-hate. Right? So we need to love the inner critic back into harmony. And we do that by not just letting it, because don't forget, this is a small child. The wounds of a small child marching in front of us, trying to adapt our behaviour, keeping us out of the present moment, in activating past wounds or manipulating future outcomes. Because all it wants to do is to come across in a way that the external world is going to love it back.
Wow.
And when we think about that and we start to see the inner critic as this poor defenseless child that's been working so hard to do this, every time we act upon judgment, shame and guilt, it's like slapping that little child, which we would never do in reality, in real life.
What do you mean acting upon judgment and blame? So I guess I'm wondering, with the inner critic, we want to love it. It's
Yes.
a part of us. We don't want to eradicate it, cut it
Nope.
off. But how can we stop that itty bitty bleep bleep committee from running the show?
By observation.
By observation.
And like I said, we have just to observe what we are doing, like setting the alarms. Like now, and here's a quick tip, that shoulding that we were talking about, the minute you feel anything other than peace and joy, the inner critic has stepped in. The minute we feel threatened, the minute we feel anxious, the minute we feel judged or judgmental of others. But we have been on such a loop with this. So definitely starting to use mindfulness, we begin to observe the thoughts that are there. But observing without judgment is absolutely critical, because if we want to teach a child to be loving, what do?
We show it love.
We show it love.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the same with our inner critic. It's not beating ourselves up when we catch ourselves doing it. It's going, oh, okay, thanks, I caught it. I get another choice here.
Yeah. Gabby Bernstein wrote a book called The Judgment Detox.
I have to read that.
Yes, you have to read that one. It's great because it's the same idea where it's, you know what, we're not saying that we don't judge people. It's part of what we do.
Yes.
It's letting ourselves off the hook when we do it, noticing when we're doing it, and trying to reframe it in a more healthy way.
And also realizing that when we're judging anybody outside of ourselves, it's an aspect within ourselves we're yet to fully understand within ourselves, or a fear within ourselves. Anything outside of us only carries the meaning that we give it.
Yeah. That's it.
It is. It really is. It's, you know, we can look at one. You and I can go to the same movie, and I can walk out and go, "That was phenomenal," and you might say, "That was the worst thing I've ever seen."
Absolutely.
So we all interpret in our own ways, but certainly creating that deeper relationship with ourselves, and just going back to that exercise that we did, how we believe that all of our primary relationships are the people and the responsibilities that we have to take care of. But we treat our children from the minute we have them. We give them time, we give them attention, we give them direction. Right? When do we sit down and do that for ourselves during the day?
We don't.
We don't. We wake up to an alarm, you're shooting out the door. If anybody takes 5 minutes in the morning, we all brush our teeth, right? Or hope to God you do. Leaving the house in the morning. Use that time and talk to the inner critic. And
so should we be waiting till we hear critical thoughts come to talk to the inner critic? No. Okay.
And as I said, tonight we're squeezing an elephant into a shoebox. I really want to encourage the viewers to go on to the Grace Love Peace website, read about their aspects of being, start to do a few of the exercises, and as they do that, you begin to see a profound shift in yourself. And that is the only way change can happen. Two things. Only you have the power to heal yourself, absolutely nobody else. And only you can take responsibility for your internal world. Nothing or no one outside of you can bring to you the depth of love of when you have a deep relationship with yourself, and you know your self-worth, and you honor yourself simply for the fact that we are incarnate here in this existence.
Oh my gosh, I could talk to you forever. We have about a minute left. What do you want to leave us with, Kylie?
If there's one thing to take away from tonight, is to have some self-compassion for yourself. The first thing we do is when something goes wrong, we beat ourselves up, we blame ourselves, or we blame exactly something outside of ourselves. You know, there's an old adage, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right?
Yeah.
You know, to me, the happiness and the contentment with ourselves is the most important relationship we will ever foster in each incarnation.
You can tell us one more thing. We want one more.
One more thing.
We want one more Kylieism.
One more thing.
We have one more minute.
Do the hourly check-in.
Yeah.
Do it.
It's huge.
People come to the Crystal Ball meditation. They've come to every session for the 12 months that we have been doing them publicly in Ottawa.
Yep.
And then I ask, have you done the daily exercise? Nope.
Because you told us 2% of people that come to this workshop will actually do it.
That's right.
And it's amazing. And I didn't even follow through till the 10:30 at night, but it really was incredible, just those first few.
And because that itty-bitty crappy committee up there and the inner critic will hijack it, right? They will come up with 1,000 reasons as to why. Actually, A Course in Miracles refers to the ego as a pack of savage dogs that will go out and find all the blame claims and proof for you and bring it right back and drop it at your feet.
Oh my gosh.
Which allows you to be right, you to be the victim, and you to feel secure within it. And that is not a way to live.
When we come back, I'll share my final thoughts. Back in a moment. I struggled with shame for as long as I can remember. I hid it behind perfectionism, where if I looked the part and acted appropriately and did everything right, then I could avoid criticism, judgment, and blame. When I drank, it was never the hangover I dreaded. It was the fear of exposing my secret, showing people how totally imperfect I was. I drank in large part to silence the voice inside my head that told me I wasn't good enough, and getting sober has allowed me to begin to peel away some of the layers that I'd wrapped myself up in for so long. Recovery has shown me that I will never be done peeling, that as soon as I remove a layer, another one is there waiting to teach me something more about myself. It's not easy to look at the parts of ourselves we don't want to acknowledge. It feels easier in the moment to blame others or circumstances for our lot in life. For most of my life, my knee-jerk reaction was to point fingers at others, rather than seeking to uncover my own pain and understand its purpose and presence in my life. If you see yourself in me, or if anything my guest shared tonight has resonated with you, I encourage you to look over your notes, go a little deeper, do a little more, to get a tiny bit closer to who you really are. I want to thank Kylie Delfino for sharing her story and wisdom with us, and I want to thank you for being here as we continue our journey together. Until next time, I want you to remember one thing, that no matter where you are, and no matter how it feels, you are never, ever alone. See you next time.